Welcome back to Fishing with Seth and Maine Sport Outfitters. I'm Seth. I'm going to be tying the olive Willy version of the woolly bugger. This is Andy.
I'll be tying a couple colors of dumbbell head Clouser Minnows.
There will be a product giveaway with those flies in this little handy dandy fly box and clamp set, so stay tuned. Okay, so in the initial stages of this version of the woolly bugger, the olive Willy, starts with debarbing the hook, something that I always do. Fish stay on really well without the barb. It's all about keeping the line tight. We'll go into more of that in future fishing videos. And I slid on a glass bead. Glass beads available really at craft stores, so I would say visit your favorite craft store. Part of the product giveaway, I'll give about 2 dozen of these glass beads away to the lucky winner. This red color has just been killer for me. And then basically I just used the base fluff from this pheasant rump feather for the tail of this woolly bugger. This is a shorter woolly bugger tail, and in the middle I tied in just a little bit of brown synthetic shimmery dubbing as a tail. So just grabbed a sparse clump, tied it in half, doubled it back on itself, so there's just a little bit of shine in the tail, nothing too garish, just a little bit of subtle flash. And I've got a piece of silver wire, which you can probably barely see because it's so microscopic thin. But part of this fly is that this trick came to me from William Servey of Washington State, the late great William Servey, I should say. He spun me off this 1,000,000-yard spool of silver wire about 20 years ago, and gave it to me like it was special contraband, like, hey, here's some really good stuff. I'm like, thanks, William. And he made me this dubbing tool, and he made these bobbins, or at least he spooled thread on them. So I'm using a few of the things that William shared with me as an avid tyer and trout fisher. So basic woolly bugger tail, and then we're gonna go into the dubbing body, which will be this kind of peacock green synthetic dubbing in a dubbing loop, and finally the collar hackle behind the bead. All right, so with this version, I do a spiky dubbed body in a dubbing loop. And in this case, I had some peacock green synthetic sparkly dubbing that was just a little too short, so I couldn't just stuff it in the dubbing loop and have it stick on its own. So I had to use some of that stuff that I use for the tailing fiber, which is just kind of a brown, sort of a spectrum brown version of the same stuff to just add enough length so that it would actually stay in the loop. So basically what we've done is we've substituted with a variety of colors for peacock green chenille. So silver wire is malleable enough that it should pop under just wiggling it back and forth to break the wire. And so we've got the segmented body of a woolly bugger, and unlike in a traditional woolly bugger which has a palmered hackle, we're using kind of the spike of this extra shaggy dubbing and the segmentation from the wire to give that body effect. and we're just gonna do a collar hackle in front. So while I call this a version of the woolly bugger, because it's how I fish and it definitely imitates so much of the fish's food that a woolly bugger would typically imitate, this is more typically a wet fly because it's got a collar hackle in the front, which I'm now going to wind, and it doesn't have that palmered body or saddle hackle. So I am going to attach this feather by the tip, and pheasant rump, since I used the fluff from the base, I'm gonna basically wind that whole feather on. The originator of this fly was a stickler for just taking one turn of hackle, but I always found that the fly got so thrashed that it would be as sparse as one turn of hackle after a few fish had an encounter with it. So tying that nice pheasant rump feather in, and of course long fibered, not too webby, strong stemmed feathers such as mallard or even big long partridge, or who knows, dyed chucker or schlappen feather. There are all sorts of substitutes, ways to do this. And I mention that because it is getting harder and harder to find just pheasant rump. So you're either going to have to do a little bit of dyeing your own pheasant skins, which are, believe it or not, a little bit easier to find, or you're going to be looking for substitutes. So while I wind on this kind of heavy head, because I really want to lock in the wire and hackle and everything, this also gives me another chance to add just a little bit more action to the front of the fly. So it's time for one more dubbing loop, but before I do that, I'm gonna add a hot spot of color, which I know the originator won't mind. He was always one for innovating, so this is going to add a little extra luster underneath the dubbing body, and it'll be just something to kind of reinforce that bright red head. So short loop, like 1.5 inches, and again, just enough of that kind of spectrum brown to add length to make the green stuff. You can see how scientific this is. Stay put. Buggy, buggy, buggy. Such a great fly, like all versions of this most indispensable pattern. It fishes awesome just sitting still or on a quick strip, or like I catch them most of the time, just kicking around in the float tube going slowly with the occasional pull on the thread. Pardon me, the fly line to impart a little action. All right, so there is pretty nearly the complete olive willy. I'm gonna whip finish. I'm putting a drop of cement at some point behind the bead on all sides so it just locks in the thread. There's another nice, really professional, glossy, natural transition to the bead on this fly. And finally, a little hairbrush. Could be a damselfly nymph, could be a dragonfly nymph. Often I think it's taken as a leech. Could be a Helgermite pattern. This was the exact color combination that I fished in our video, the Mid-Coast Bass Frenzy. It's a great bass fly, but it is just a great all-purpose fly. So add this or some version that you concoct to your collection and just fish it. Fish it slowly, fish it deep, fish it on a varying retrieve. You can hardly go wrong. I would say the one tip would be fish it slowly. It really does a lot while it's just basically sitting still, and while the action of the waves on the line might impart enough action to get a serious take. So those will be part of our product giveaway.
All right, here we go, guys. We're doing a dumbbell eye Clouser Minnow. I believe these are 3/16 size eyes. I'm going to start my thread on my hook, wind a little bit down. I'm going to come back up. Getting your dumbbell eyes on your hook can be tricky. If I'm doing a production thing in my house, if I'm tying a bunch or at a station, I will, and I know that I'm doing it, I will glue them on the night before. But another way to do it is to just grab the dumbbell eye between your thumb and forefinger. You got to be a little tricky, and you're going to start with 2 wraps overhand, and then you're going to make a figure 8 and come back the other way and do a figure 8 lashing to keep it straight. And then if you can see down there, we've got the dumbbell eyes nice and balanced, you know, even. They're not crooked, they're not this. They do move a little bit, but we're gonna put a little dab of glue on there to hold them in before we start tying the rest of the fly. And I'm not gonna use the brush that's on our head cement here. I'm just gonna use my bodkin and just take just a little drop to hold it in place, because we don't want the glue to interfere with the rest of the tie. So I'm using a pearl and a gold crystal flash, and I'm using a silver Flashabou. So we've got our Flashabou, and now we're getting ready to do the belly of our Clouser Minnow. I'm going to grab some white. I'm choosing white for the belly because most fish, bait fish and regular fish, have a white, pearlish white, some type, you know, some light colored belly. I'm getting my bucktail. I'm getting it from the middle of the tail in this area here. You want to get smaller, thinner fibers, or else you're going to wind up, as you tie in your bucktail, it'll flare out. You'll find occasionally that your bucktail will want to twist as you tie it in over your dumbbell eye. So you can just take your fingers, and you kind of had it loosely lashed in, you can straighten it out and then really cinch on it. And we're going to do one more drop. So there's a orange and white Clouser Minnow with dumbbell eyes, Flashabou, and pearl and gold crystal flash.
Thank you as always, good fishing folk, for tuning in and sharing of these fishing and tying ideas. Thank you, Andy, for your expertise.
Thanks, Seth.
My pleasure. And as a thank you from us to you, Andy's creations and my flies from today will be part of our product giveaway. So don't forget to follow the link and share your information in the product or in the video description below. And you will get this nice Dr. Slick fly box, prism clamp set, cutters and pin-on wire reel retractor, and this special insert which you can stick onto your boat or put into the box. Stay tuned for future videos, everybody. Bye for now.